Welcome to the Camino Cafe podcast. I'm Leigh Brennan, your host. Hey, have you had a chance to check out our newest offering? It's Good Morning Santiago, and it is available on YouTube. So I hope you will check it out. It is just a fun, great video blog, if you will, all about Santiago and the Camino. We share news, we share events, and most of all, we give you a beautiful tour every week of a different location in Santiago, and it's just so much fun. But today we kick off season 4 of the Camino Cafe podcast, and for episode 1, I can't think of anyone better than John Brierley to kick it off. John is a Camino legend. He has written over 60 books about the Camino. He is a true guide for the Camino, if not for life. So I hope you will take a moment to listen to this interview. And after it ends, I hope you will pop over and take a listen to the fun game we played of 20 Camino questions with John. So thank you for being here. Let me know what you think of the episode. John and I talked about a week before Christmas. He joined me from his home in Dartmouth, which is on the south coast of the UK. And you're going to join us here in the conversation. We just started talking about how it all began. So let's hear from John. What prompted you that very first time that you decided that you were going to walk the Camino some 25 years ago?
Gosh, and you say we have 1 hour. No. I mean, essentially what happened in my life was that I had what we would classically call an midlife existential crisis. I had everything that everyone was supposed to have if you were to be happy and successful. I had 2.2 children, which is apparently the ideal number. 3's too many, 2's not enough. All the stats I covered, but my life was completely empty. And at the age of 39, I had this sort of plastic clock story where I'm being presented with a plastic clock, presented for all my years of service. And it literally came to me almost every day, waking or sleeping. And it woke me up. I hadn't realized it was a wake-up call. What else was it? It was the story of a clock being presented to me. And it was a wake-up call. And that, my peers thought I was going mad and should see go to hospital, as it were. But actually, I think we're all presented with the possibility of a breakthrough. A breakthrough into another understanding of the meaning of life and what it's for. And anyway, I took the time off, what I grandly called a business sabbatical, and took my family away in a camper van, and we went to travel the world while Dad sought to find himself. And we ended up in a place called Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. And I saw these people with backpacks, and there weren't many then, because this is going back 25, 30 years ago. So there weren't many as there are today. But it got me, that was my first, if you like, introduction to, something's happening here. It was some years later when I went back, and it would help me partly through this sort of transformative time and to break through into a whole different understanding and value system of the world. So I owe the Camino a huge gratitude for this helping me, aiding me into the breakthrough, rather than the breakdown. The short answer, or the simple answer to your question is, I fell into a period of utter and complete existential angst in the sense of the total meaninglessness of my life at that point.
Wow. So you take this break from work and you just happened to end up in Saint Jean. Like you had no idea that this Camino thing even existed.
Heard of Camino de Santiago before.
That doesn't seem like any type of accident, does it?
No, it didn't. It wasn't.
So you saw all these people with backpacks, and then I guess you guys go back home, and then you announce, "I'm going to go walk." Like, how did that go over?
Well, no, it was fine, because my family, luckily, and my wife, she's a psychotherapist, she knew that, I was very dissatisfied with my life, and the children never saw me because I was heavily, in inverted commas, an important sort of businessman, doing businessy things. So I never really saw them. So the first year, when I never got back, incidentally, at the end of that year, that's sabbatical. I said to my partners, I said, look, I'm not coming back. Something's happened. I have a new life opening up for me. And my family were thrilled because they had a dad that they'd never had before. My wife had a husband. Now, admittedly, he became then a rather wandering husband, but at least he was now a satisfied, happy wanderer. So the family were all incredibly supportive. And to that extent, because it wasn't easy what I did, giving up a sort of a life and all the sort of the riches and success and accolades that came with it. And I don't think I could have done it if I'd also been fighting with the family, if I'd been right about that. So their support was sort of, I think, probably quite critical. I think something else would have happened, but at least I had my family on board, which was great.
So how long was it from that trip when you had the camper van and you were first in St. John? How long was it before you took that first step of your first walk on the Frances?
Well, it was a couple of years later. So it was part of the overall awakening that was happening within me. And I knew at that stage that, there was something else. I had help and assistance from unseen subtle realms. And I became very trusting of that sort of inner voice and that inner wisdom that is available to all of us if we take time to listen to it. Mm-hmm. Now, as a man in business, I was never a particularly good listener. It doesn't come naturally to that there. But I'd started to listen because I started to see things and understand things better. Now, it was a big journey ahead of me because I was, I'd grown up, had lots of prejudices and conditioned that this is the way life is and was. So I had a lot to let go of and break down. And I think that's one of the great assets and attributes of the Camino. If we take the time it takes to, walk from Songwriter, it's a month. If you're walking up from Sevilla, it's 6 weeks. It's, there's this block of time away from the familiar.
Right.
And that, I think, is where the transformation happens, because we allow, we're in unfamiliar surroundings. And if we allow ourselves to open up our heart and our mind, things happen, insights come in. And that is the efficacy, I think, of the Camino, this time away from the familiar. This sort of crucible where insights can come in. And we got through meeting with other people who were all on the same. Where else in the world can you walk into a cafe and say to somebody sitting at the next door table, what makes you tick? What's not working in your life? Where you're going? Who are you? Beyond the, what you look like there sitting in a chair. I mean, we can ask these deep, meaningful questions. In fact, not only can we, I'm a great believer that we actually on the Camino, in fact, I would then broaden out the Camino to be, we're on the Camino now. Once we're on the Camino, once we're on a sort of pilgrimage, a journey through life, a spiritual journey through life, a journey of spiritual awakening, we can never not be on the Camino. We can forget it at times, but basically we're always, once we have that awareness, we're always on it. Now, so I think that's, again, a great attribute of the Camino, because there's no other place where basically everybody has not only the permission, but I think almost the requirement.
I love that, the responsibility of us as a pilgrim.
Correct.
I love that, because people have said to me oftentimes, why did you have to run off to Spain? Why do you have to walk this Camino? You could walk, there are millions of trail miles in the United States. You didn't have to go do this. Yeah. What is it you think about this Camino that brings about this opening and brings about this responsibility that we find ourselves as pilgrims? How does this happen?
Well, I think there's several reasons. One is that this route, now, whether you believe in, in energies, lines, and fields and vibration, I mean, we all should do it, because everything is in vibration. I mean, everything is sort of, in a sense, scientifically. So there's a vibration on this route that is literally for millions of years, because don't forget, this route is pre-Christian. This is an old pagan route. All the Celtic tribes who sort of walk westwards, following to the end of the world, to Finnis, were asking after the big questions. What on earth is all this about? So for thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, people have walked this route with a high intention in mind. And so the route is embedded in this route is that search, that inquiry. It's a path of inquiry that's deeply, deeply embedded. That's one. The second reason is what we just referred to a moment ago. This route carries, you can walk at the, any of the routes in America, but do you have permission or the responsibility when you meet somebody in a cafe on the route to start talking about the meaning of life.
No, they'd probably run from me if I
They
brought that
probably
up.
run from you. So those are two, there's a historic reason and an old energetic reason, and the other one is there's a very current present reason, is that we're all talking, we're all seeking, we're all looking, we're all there because something either isn't working in our life and we're looking for answers.
Yeah.
So we're all have put our foot on an overtly spiritual route of inquiry. And that inquiry is the big, deep existential questions. Who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? What's the point in my incarnation at this time? What's my sacred contract? What did I come here to do? Those big, deep questions. And they bubble to the surface as we walk along and as people help us. And we realize that we're not alone, especially if we're walking alone. If we go on our own, then we've got no history, and we're meeting people with no history. So
Yes.
it's quite hard to be prejudiced or form an opinion about somebody that you don't know their history. So we tend to be more open, I think.
Yes.
And so I think those are two big reasons. Now, one thing if I could just nip in here, you didn't ask me, but if I could just.
Okay.
One of the things that I think is terribly important, and more of my, suggestions or work is about what I call bringing the Camino home, because actually we can't if in order to feel this sense of connectedness with a bigger picture, with the divine, whatever words we want to use, we have to come and walk the physical Caminos to Santiago. Something's wrong. We need to get the insights. We need to get the sense of a presence of something that's, a larger canvas in our lives, and we need to bring it home, because we can't spend our lives on the Camino. Now, hold on. We can't spend our lives on the physical Camino. We need to bring the Camino home and know that journey continues wherever we are.
Right. It doesn't end in Santiago, right?
It doesn't
just
end in
keeps on
Santiago.
going.
It does not.
Does not end. One of the things I really love about your guidebooks is I feel like we see both sides of the coin of you. While it's a guidebook and there's all the maps, there's still this deep spiritual stuff going on if you read the book in detail. And I love that part. And I wanted to start with first going back to the practical sides of your book. You got this idea to write a guidebook during your first Camino, is that right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So was this just an inspiration that came to you one day as you were walking, or how did that even come about?
Well, it was, really, without trying to sort of make something big out of it, I literally came to a point on the Camino where I had an altered state. And I was in that state for a deep state, an altered state for, I was out of it completely, in a sort of a different, very unfamiliar realm. And it sort of lasted on and off for about 10 days, 7 days in particular. And it was sort of a revelation. It was sort of like, this voice in my head, this wise voice that I sort of began to recognize after a while, was saying, you're going to write a guidebook. And I said, well, what's the point? I don't speak Spanish, and then, no. And almost the thing was given to me. No, this is a mystical and practical manual for the modern day pilgrim. And so the two aspects of the journey will be in there. And
so you knew that from the beginning.
From that point on, and then I never really questioned that if you like, that instruction or that voice who said, okay, well, then show me. And then it was quite an interesting, but then all the doors started to open about, how the thing would emerge. For a start, I found a publisher, because back then, there weren't really many associations and so on. So I didn't know sort of what to do. But the publisher said, well, now nobody gets a book published on your first effort. The publisher said, no, this book must be published. We'll do it. And then I tried to find a cartographer, because I had a certain, I realized that the people coming on the Camino were likely to be not hikers per se. I would say that over 90% of all the people on the Camino are people who aren't really, they don't really understand how to read a map. That's not where they're coming from.
Yes.
You know, a hiker doesn't need the guidebook. You know, the hiker says, well, what on earth are you, you know, putting the page upside down? The north is up here. It's not there. But no, I said, no, this is for people who don't know about maps, and, you know, they turn the map upside down and can't quite work out where they are. No, this is something where, you know, you're going down the page, you start at the top, you go down the bottom, and if there's a cafe on the left, then it's on the left. And if it's on the right, it's on the right. So, you know,
Yeah.
it's very simple to follow, because, you know, the wind is blowing and it's raining. You don't want to, you know, be turning big flaps of pages up and down. No, you've got to get the information quickly and easily, and know, oh, no, there's another one, you know, just a mile down the road. This one's full. Let's go on and see if the other one's there. That type of quickly assimilated information. And then, of course, I realized, oh, wow, my background, my training is I'm a surveyor. So, you know, I was trained to prepare maps, and that's what I did. And so that was, oh, well, that's interesting. So I have that skill. So I don't need a cartographer, because the cartographers couldn't understand what I was wanting to do. They just didn't understand it. So I said, oh, well, you know, my publisher luckily said, no, we ought to do it. That's the obvious thing. And then I tried to get photographers, but they all wanted nice little pretty pictures of you know, this, that, and the other. And I wanted to, you know, the rubbish dumps that we have to walk through in order to get that out. I still haven't mastered rain. I would love to be able to get a photograph where people look at a picture and shudder. And,
yeah, right.
that sense of cold and wet. I've tried often in Galicia. There's a lot of rain in Galicia, but I haven't been very successful in that one. But you mentioned there about, you know, personalizing it. I had wanted, and again, it was sort of like, you know, this book, you need to personalize it, so when people are walking with your guidebook, they feel that you're with them. And that's what I always wanted to do, which is why I put a photograph of myself in it. It was like, no, this is, so people could feel, oh yes, you know, he's, oh my, I was going to make, oops, you know, John is with me. You know, we're on this journey together. And a lot of people write and say that to me. And that's wonderful that I can, that they can feel I'm with them, because I am with them.
You are. I literally had that in my notes today, is that we never walk alone. John Brierley is with us. You know, one of your guidebooks, I'm sitting there with them today, right? Almost everyone I meet on the Camino has your guidebook in their backpack.
Yes.
And I feel like because of that, we all feel like we kind of know you, right? And I wondered, that must feel strange sometimes when you're out walking the Camino, people coming up and meeting you. But I wondered, what is something, you know, that you know about yourself that you think we would be surprised to know? Or are there parts about you that you wish people knew about you that maybe we can't pick up in the guidebooks?
Not really, in the sense that, but there's two things. There's a practical side, and that is, it gets very difficult. You know, I'm a sort of a typical man. I mean, there are atypical men, but you know, I can only do one thing at a time, and I cannot walk and hold a conversation with somebody and have my eye on whether there's a, you know, a new water tap there, or whether the route has changed, or a new cafe is opened or closed. So I need to stay very focused when I'm updating these guidebooks. And when I started this, I never thought I'd have to update them. But what's the point in a guidebook that's out of date?
Yeah.
And a lot of the guidebooks are, you know, last printed 10 years ago or something. Well, the thing changes it changes very fast. Now, in the Camino de Santi and the Camino Frances, it's not so important, because there's so many cafes and so many people. I don't know, it would be very difficult to get lost. But you could, of course, and people do if they're chatting, and then there's a waymark or something. But if they're, you know, if we're focused, we can't really. And if a cafe is closed, well, there's another one opened up 100 yards away. So it's not so important. But the more remote routes, like the Camino in Invierno, it becomes rather more important to have to make sure that they're up to date. So I never thought that I would have to go back and walk them continually and update them very regularly. But you have to do that. But I try and stay incognito as much as I can, because not that I don't love to meet pilgrims and have this sort of conversation I'm having with you. We even said earlier on that that's maybe our responsibility, but I've also a responsibility to keep the guidebooks up to date. So there's that part of me that wants to stay incognito, because otherwise I get distracted with conversation. You know, that's one aspect of it. So Leigh, what did you ask me?
Oh, just about, what don't we know about you?
Oh,
And,
right.
what do you wish people knew about you? Because I'm imagining when you are recognized that people kind of assume that they know you, like we've been reading your books for years and we
Yes.
carry your
Well,
book. Your name is mentioned all the time during your walk on the
yes.
Camino.
Well, I think I sort of said it in my personal note. People can see my struggle. I've had struggles. We've all had struggles in our life. And so I struggle like everybody else. My struggles are different, but a struggle is a struggle. I've had my breakthroughs, and that's articulated there too. I think more than anything, I more and more, I see that we all have a commonality. Human life is so, about division and separation, and, there's you and me and this and that, and, duality. But actually, the more I think of it, the more I believe that actually there is a unified wholeness that we are all a part of. We all come from a wholeness, from a unified sense. And so the journey, to me, the journey back is from separation to wholeness, to holiness. I believe that we are all divine beings. We all have a divine source. And to that extent, we are all have exactly the same spiritual DNA. So maybe you didn't know it, Leigh, but you and I are brother and sister.
Yes.
And I mean that on a very real level. We literally come from the same parentage, whatever we want to call the parentage. We come from the same source, whatever we want to call that source. So
Yes.
therefore, really on that level, on a very profound level, there's nothing that separates us. In fact, the only way we can get home is by recognizing our sameness.
Yes.
Home being a sort of sense of unity, which is the definition of your profession, yoga.
Yes. Oh yeah. And it's that connection that we feel. I feel so connected when I'm walking.
Yes.
To myself, to nature,
yes,
to God, to all the people that I'm walking with.
Yes. Now, one of the things that I haven't mastered yet, so I would imagine one of your things, what's your favorite Camino? That's often the question people have. But
yeah,
each brings its own, experience and so on and so forth. So that to that extent, there's no real favorite. But what I do love is the more remote, quieter routes like the Camino in Vienna, which is just sort of, you're bathed in nature, surrounded by it, held by it, embraced by this sense of peacefulness and wholeness. Now, what I would love to be able to do is to bring that sense into the 5 days in from Sarria into Santiago, where I'm mixing hundreds of other people. And still hold that sense of stillness and divinity. That I haven't yet fully mastered. There are times when I do, but oftentimes when I get, caught up in the busyness and the frenzy and how on earth I'm going to find the information I want when all this is happening around me. So I do get spun out still. I mean, I love this sense of, this sort of centrifugal force where we all have become splattered on the outside of a drum. It's like a washing drum. Then they're going so fast, it literally fires us onto the surface.
Yeah.
And then we twirling around at this enormous speed, mistaking busyness for aliveness. And yet, and by definition, we've lost in our center, the center where everything is still. And so I get spun out still more than I would like to be spun out.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the things that's so likable about you is that you have the same types of struggles that we all have on the Camino, and you come across as such as the real person that you are, and hearing that you have struggles too, I think encourages all of us to keep going.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking, as you're saying that, I think maybe those last 5 days are kind of a reminder, okay, well, you were able to center yourself out in nature, but here's a new challenge. You still need to be able to do this when it's busy and when you get home, which is what you were talking about earlier, right?
Correct. Absolutely. It's like, what's the point in church on a Sunday, or the synagogue on a Saturday, or the prayer meeting on the Friday, if if on Monday we're sort of shouting at our partner or kicking the dog out of the way? I mean, it's a nonsense. We have to bring it home into every aspect of our lives: social, economic, our care for the environment. We must learn to bring the Camino home into our everyday life, our every moment of everyday life. That's the demand. That's what we're striving for. We should be striving for.
My goodness, you are amazing.
We're all amazing, Leigh. We're all amazing, and we just got to look beyond the sort of the facade that we present, and our personality and our personal dramas, and and know that beyond all that stuff and nonsense that we surround ourselves with, we are all beautiful beings. We come from a divine source, and so divinity is within us. We're beautiful beings, all of us, without exception.
If we just wouldn't forget it, right? All that layer of all that stuff that gets in the way.
We've forgotten it. Absolutely. We become totally separated from our source.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder, when you get ready to go and walk, and say on a typical day when you're walking, are there certain practices that you use to help you keep that intention throughout your walk? Are there certain prayers or meditations or things that you're doing that keep you on track? Because I can only imagine that when people recognize you, they're talking to you, you're having to think about the guidebook updates. So I imagine you have to walk with a really sharp focus. So how do you keep that?
Well, I do. In the when I get up, I have a practice. Now it varies depending on what's happening around me and the circumstances, and whether breakfast is about to end or begin, or whether the weather's doing what I need to prepare for. But I will always start the day with a reflection on my purpose for being in this world, in this life, and. I realize now that needn't be the classic 20 minutes. Where is this sort of thing that meditation needs to be a certain length of time? It's to touch in with the source, with the sense of the divine, with the divinity, with my divine roots, to touch in with that, and that needn't take a long time. I always recommend to people and suggest, myself and everybody else, that we take time before each Camino to try and find a purpose for that Camino, and so to refresh our minds, why are we walking this route? And if that is just to get healthy or lose 2 stone, well, that's fine. Keep your focus there. But if in most cases, it's got a sort of a deeper significance that we put there, then to get back in touch with that, say, oh, well, I'm walking this because I'm trying to learn to be kinder to people. I'm trying to let go my sense of prejudices or judgments, or whatever it is that we went with that intention. Get back in touch with that intention, and to take the time. Now it's difficult if you're in the middle of a sort of a crowded albergue with people rustling and packing their bags and so on, but you can always lie even if you're in that circle, you can always lie in your bunk with your eyes closed, and take time to maybe breathe. Breathing is so important. I mean, not only breathing when you're out on the Camino, but just taking that time to even cup 2 or 3 breaths, and then bring yourself present, and then remind ourselves of why we're of what it is, and then we can get up and join the fray or whatever. And of course, also along the route, I will always take time when there's quiet, when I'm when there's I see a little. I love going off route. So I wonder what's happening up there. Well, I spent most of my time in looking for alternative routes. If I see asphalt, I'm always looking about how can we get around the asphalt.
Yes.
I mean, you know, I spent many years, you know, coming to terms with, you know, nearly into all the big cities. It took me a few years, but about 20 years ago, I began to realize that through every city, there's a river, and every river has a walkway along it. So you can go into virtually every city along the Camino, along the river.
Mm.
Um, and, you know, often the waymark routes are, don't go along the river, but hardly any of them go along the river. So, you know, I'm always looking for those alternative things, and rivers are very healing, you know, the water and the trees that surround it and so on and so forth. Again, I make the point that, you know, if you want to trundle through, you know, 7 miles of asphalt road into Burgos, well, there's a learning, I'm sure, to be learned from that, but it is much easier to fall into a sort of you know, a bigger picture.
Yes.
And we're walking along the lovely river Alanzone into the center of town, and indeed walking out along the river too, because it took me a little while to realize, well, of course, if you can walk in, you can walk out along the
Yes.
river.
Yeah.
So so to take time not only to start the day, but during the day, to find those moments where you can just take a bit of a quiet. And most people I find are very respectful. You know, if you want to sort of take time out and go and sort of sit on a rock and, you know, have a quiet time, or, you know, to meditate for whatever, people will leave you alone. They know what you're doing.
Yes.
And that's, again, another lovely thing. You know, if you're on a normal hiking route, people might come over and saying, are you all right? You know, do you need help, or, or whatever. But on the Camino to Santiago, there's a sense, oh no, there's, you know, oh, John's over there. He'd probably take a quiet time. You know, we'll leave him. But maybe we'll wait a little bit longer in the cafe next to make sure that he was all right, that he comes in. So there's a sense of caring along the.
Mm.
It's very beautiful too, and get in touch with that as we walk.
Yeah, I agree. And then what about when you get back home then? How do you keep that intention alive? So you know, you've returned home and, you know, you feel great, or you've had these transformations, and then, you know, parts of your old life start kind of challenging you again. So how do you keep that intention alive once home?
Now, that's a really wonderful question, and a difficult one, because you know, when it's slightly different now, because you know, I'm known as a, you know, I'm a professional pilgrim. That's what I do.
Right.
So it's slightly easier, but in the early days, people would say, "Oh, you know, welcome back to the real world."
Mm,
What the hell is the real world? I mean, if the real
exactly.
world is the consensus reality that's out there, I tell you, we're looking up the wrong, we're barking up the wrong tree. The
Yeah.
world, as we see it, consensus reality as we know it, is literally mad. I mentioned that the other day. So we, when we get back, is to know if we've taken the time. Oh, take time to integrate. That's another terribly
Yes.
important thing that
Integrate.
so many of us miss out. So we've had this incredible experience. It could be whatever, it could be a yoga retreat, it could be whatever. But in this case, we're talking about the Camino de Santiago. We had this wonderful experience along the Camino. We've had the insights. We have a sense of, you know, answers to some of the questions that have bubbled to the surface. And then we look at our calendar and we say, oh my God, the Ryanair flight, it's tomorrow. And then we rush back, and then we arrive back and we say, oh my God, I start work tomorrow.
Yeah.
And we have allowed no time to integrate the experience. Now, that's an awful, massive, terrible waste of the opening that happened.
Yeah.
You know, please, all of us, when we get back, don't allow the consensus reality to say, welcome back to the real world. You know, this is how it works. Hold on, however difficult it is, hold on to the inspirations, the insights that came, and take time to really integrate them. Ideally, you know, before you rush back to, you know, I'm a great believer in, you know, taking time out on, you know, some days, even a week, and go to, you know, Lires between,
Yeah.
or Moussier, which is sort of a bit calmer than Finnis, or go anywhere, go to a little town that isn't even on the Camino, and just hang out for some time. Just really let the experience, the insights, get time to integrate. Now, the other thing when you get home is to also, there are wonderful ways of staying in touch with the thing. There's a wonderful, I think she's American, she's got an American accent, who lives now in Santiago. She's got a new podcast called Camino Cafe. Now, check her out.
I didn't even pay him for this plug. Thank you.
You know, there are so many ways for us to keep in touch. And back at home in America, there are something like 60 or 70 different chapters from North to South of America. And you can go and actually meet people on a regular basis and talk about things and, you know, keep the flame alive. So there are ways to do it, and take time. You know, join up your local associations, go for local walks once a, you know, sometimes happen once a month or whatever. Connect back into the inspiration. We can do that back home.
Yes, we can. I was just thinking as you were saying this, John, you know, it would be nice as if we pilgrims would start calling our Camino experience the real world. Let's make that the real world, right?
Correct.
The way that we act, the way that we carry ourselves, the way we care about one another.
Correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely correct. That's right. Yeah.
So recently, John, I'm sorry to hear that you had a diagnosis of cancer, and but you decided to start walking after you had this diagnosis. And I wondered if we could talk a little bit about your experience. You know, the other day when you were on the APOC open house, you talked about really finding some healing on the Camino. So can we talk about that a few minutes and what your experience has been like? You've walked 2 times this past year, and I'm curious to hear about all the things that happened during that.
Well, essentially, I would never wanted to go the chemo route, but, you know, I had responsibilities to my family and the pilgrims who like to walk with me. So after, but it didn't work, and my heart was giving out. So they eventually unplugged me and said, well, you know, there's nothing more we can do. Because I had a Whipple operation, I had a part of my pancreas removed because it had cancer, and then it had gone into the lungs, and then it was in the into the liver. So it was all an end game. And they said, look, there's, you know, there's nothing we can do for you. You know, it's a sort of end of life, and, you know, you've probably got a couple of months, something like that. So I said, oh, that's fine. You know, I'm ready to go when I'm ready to go, but I will go. The Camino will be either part of my ending, or it'll be part of my healing. It will be both. So I was delighted, because now I didn't have to justify all this sort of chemical treatment. I said, oh, I'm off. I'm going to walk the Camino. The Caminos. That's what I do for a living. And the oncologist said, well, you won't be here to walk them. And I said, oh, that's fine, whatever. But anyway, that's my intention. So off I went and walked the Camino Portuguese, and in April, May, when I was supposed to have gone. And of course, the Camino is an incredibly healing environment. Now, not just from the point of view of it being, you know, linked in to something that's way beyond us, you know, some larger canvas, some spiritual canvas, but from a purely physical point of view, you know, the bodies were made to move. They were designed to move. And indeed, so many of the modern problems today has become sedentary, and we're not moving. You know, cancer cells don't like oxygen. They don't like a positive attitude. They don't like the vibration that comes from nature. It's not good for their maintenance. So anyway, I walked down through Portugal. The early weeks were really quite challenging and difficult, but then I eventually arrived in Santiago, where all my family came out, my children, my grandchildren. We walked out to Santiago together as a sort of a final journey, because at that stage it looked, you know, that maybe it wouldn't in ending. We had a beautiful time out there, where we sort of prepared for, you know, Papa going, and you know, and how there was so much love and appreciation there, which is also part of the healing. And then I came back from that, and I felt better than I'd ever felt before. And so then I decided, well, I need to go off more to Camino Frances, which I did. And then I felt fantastic there, and I'd never felt better in my life. And now
Wow.
I'm planning to go off again in at the end of March, April, and walk some of the other routes. So, you know, my intentionality is to keep going. I mean, I as I said the other day, I'll die in harness, hopefully. I certainly far sooner expire along the Caminos to Santiago one day than sort of spending 6 months at the end of tubes in a hospital bed. So I'm going to walk until I can't walk anymore. And how long that will be, I don't know, but I'm ready to go whenever. But the Camino has been my life for 25 years. And as I say, it will be part of my ending, just as it's been part of my healing into, when I say, I'm now talking about healing of my mind, you know, healing of my heart. Because that's where the real healing takes place. I mean, these physical bodies were only in them a short space of time. At some stage, we've got to let them go. So the real healing is heart and mind. And that's the healing that I'm looking for and working on at the moment.
Wow. Well, I don't know what defines a pilgrim more than the answer you just gave. The fact that, you know, you'd rather be here on the Camino than anywhere else. That if you have to go, that's the place, you know, and you just keep going. I love what you said about what cancer doesn't like, the oxygen, the nature. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, I mean, I'm not medically, I mean, I'm hopeless. You know, thank heavens my wife is with me and didn't leave me during all these years and loves me dead. And she does, you know, she says this, that, and that. So I'm really not up on this at all, except to say that, you know, I do understand that you know, cancer cells don't do well flooded with oxygen. They don't thrive, or they don't even survive with high levels of oxygenation. And so, you know, and I have the alternative practices that I do. I don't think it's appropriate to talk about them now, but I mean, I do, you know, it's mostly intentionality.
Yes.
It's mostly, you know, meditation and mindfulness. You know, my Camino will continue. I mean, it'll continue when I'm in the physical body, and it'll continue after, because what else is the journey home? In and out of these bodies and through whatever we believe in, reincarnation or whatever our belief system is, and there are hundreds of belief systems, and I don't pertain to it. I keep a very open mind about all the belief systems. In fact, another great gift of the Caminos, I know digressing here somewhat, is that we meet so many people from so many different cultures and backgrounds and ideas. And, you know, I couldn't believe the amount of people I kept on meeting. And I met an Anabaptist last year. Anabaptist, I'd never heard of Anabaptism, you know, and then I started to research. Do you know how many different Christian sects there are today?
How many? I have no idea.
Well, it's interesting because I have this from the professor of religion at Oxford University. There are over 43,000.
43,000?
43,000. So, you know, so now I'm not hundreds, I'm talking about thousands, 43,000. Now, if you take that stat, it's quite interesting, because then you suddenly think, oh my heavens, the world is so full of different ideologies, ideas, and so on and so forth. So I think part of a pilgrim trait is to keep very, very open. Now, most of the people I've met along the Camino, and some of the people I've had the deepest conversations with, are atheists.
Yes.
I mean, atheists I'm not an atheist, I'm a Gnostic, if I wanted to give myself a label. But agnostics and atheists are often fascinating because they have no, if you like, dogmatic position. They're very open.
Yeah.
To looking for things. So whether you're atheist or agnostic, I've met Hindus, I've met Muslims, I've met hundreds of people who profess to be Buddhists. I've met along the Camino. It's the most eclectic. There's nowhere on the world that I know of that is so eclectic. You know, you can walk the Hajj, and 5,000 people walk that every year, but I doubt if there's any Christians amongst them. You can walk to Fatima in Portugal, where I think it's about 100,000 or 10,000 a year ago. But I doubt if you'd meet anybody who isn't Catholic.
Right.
On it. You know, you can go to the Kumbh Mela in India, where something like something like 5 million go every year along the Ganges. And I'm sure there's lots of wonderful people exploring there, but I mean, the vast bulk of them will be Hindus. But Camino de Santiago, no, everybody. And that's its efficacy. It's so open. It's so eclectic. Anybody is welcome along that route. Indeed, I've often heard about it and I've written about it. I won't have time to quickly tell you this wonderful story about the, I can't pronounce the name, it's a Belgian name. And it's called something like Oinkton. Now, this is an organization, fascinating. And they, in the Belgian court, if they have a juvenile who's up for a custodial sentence, and if they get, I think it's 2 or psychologists supporting the person, the judge can, instead of giving a custodial sentence to the juvenile, they can approve for the juvenile to walk the Camino de Santiago.
No.
Now, what's fascinating about this, they have never had anybody take this route who reoffended. And this story was almost too fabulous. I do mention it in some of the guidebooks. But I happened to come across, well, on my journey out to Finnis with the family, my farewell journey.
Yeah.
I found myself walking with a young woman, and we got talking, and she was one of the, I forget what name she gives it. She was one of the guides who goes with these people.
Okay.
Because they have to have a support person with them. So I absolutely know that this happens. And she was such a beautiful woman. I said, well, how do we, only everybody gets a small allowance. Whatever it is, £10 a week or whatever. They sleep out in the wild in tents. And I said, well, what happens if they, want to, buy alcohol or cigarettes? She said, well, then that's how they spend their £10. And I said, well, you don't make any judgment. No, she said, absolutely. The whole point is that these people are usually where they are because people have been making judgments about them.
Whoa.
So my job is simply to walk with them and to be there because, we have a responsibility. These people have been offending. So I need to be there. The court has approved that I have to be there. But I make absolutely no judgment about them in any way, shape, or form. I'm just there as a support person if they want to come and talk to me and whatever or whatnot. And I said, well, what? She said, well, after a few weeks, drinking too much alcohol and they're getting sick, they're struggling to go. And she said they soon realized that it's far sooner spend their money on some decent food. But I think that's another aspect of pilgrimage that's so important for us to get beyond judgments of each other.
Yes.
Can you imagine going through a world where even that story on itself, no judgment? I mean, that's fabulous to be so trusting of individuals' journey that it brings them to wherever they need to go, and we don't hold a judgment. I think that's a real true pilgrim. But to be there, available if somebody wants help, of course. But to travel with no judgment, I think that's a wonderful part of being a true pilgrim.
Oh, I agree. What a powerful lesson. Powerful lesson in that story. What was it like, John, for you on this, what you called your farewell walk?
Well, it was
to walk into the city, your family walked in with you.
Yes. Well, walking into the city was fine. I mean, I love being on the Camino. I met wonderful people, as we all do. I had wonderful experiences, and I came to terms with my own mortality, and that we've all got to die, and I'm ready to go whenever that is. I think I've more things to do and more work to do, and I think I will be given more time to do that. But I've known I'm not clinging anymore. I'm utterly free to move on out of this physical body when the time comes. Meeting the family I found a lot harder because they were in a place of, intense, they thought this might really be the last time that they would be with me, because we're spread around, we don't all live in the same town. And, having the grandchildren there, all the three generations, it was very, very beautiful. We would travel very slowly because, I mean, the grandchildren weren't all walking. I walked the whole thing, and the children and my wife joined me at various times. But arriving into Finnis, we had this lovely sort of ceremony there where we just appreciated each other, and when we agreed to let each other all go, to have no clinging, and just to be free to travel the remaining time in this life, so we could go on free into the next one, into the subtle realm. So it was a very powerful experience, and I felt, since then, I don't feel I need to say goodbye anymore. I said my goodbye. And to some extent, at the first time, that discussion we had with the APOC, a couple of days ago, I publicly said, well, what is the secret? No, lots of people have cancer. I've got cancer. I've got to die at some stage. And so, to some extent, I'm saying goodbye. It's lovely, because once you've said goodbye, all that concern's gone. Then I can go whenever the time is right, without remorse, or without clinging, or without anything else. But I shall go with the Camino as a metaphor for the spiritual journey through life, through this physical life into the next life.
And is it not one of the teachings for us to be able to let go?
Of course it is. And that's, of course, another great teaching of the Camino. I mean, we start by letting go all that stuff that we thought we needed in our backpack, but it was beginning to buckle our knees. So we start by, and that's a very important practical, physical lesson that then goes into the mind lesson. Well, what stuff are we carrying in our backpack that we don't need? What stuff are we carrying in our mind that we don't need? And emptying out the mind, I mean, that's my understanding of all of the great mystical traditions, is letting go that stuff.
Yes.
Emptying the mind of all its clutter.
Right.
That's, all the mystics talk about that, just let go, let it all go. It's all illusion anyway. Let it go.
Yes. Yeah.
Why stress yourself out?
Yeah, let it go. And what was the age group, the age range? So how young is the youngest grandchild that was with you?
My grandson was 3 months.
So you've got a 3-month-old.
Yes. And I'm 75, and the next one, my wife's 66 or something. So we had this lovely range of a 3-month-old. Yeah. Well, of course, 3 months old is quite easy to travel with, because you could shove them in the backpack. Is when they get to 3 and 4 and they want to walk, but they can't walk very fast or very far. That's where the problem comes.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow. I mean, what an amazing journey you had during that walk, to be able to have this experience.
Yeah, very powerful. Very, very powerful. Yeah. And in a sense, it sort of freed me up. Now, I've never felt really so free since then. I've said my goodbyes. I've done everything that I should have done. I tried chemo, it didn't work. Now I'm trying something else, this alternative, allowing the Camino to heal me.
Yes.
In my mind and my heart. And then if that extends to a physical healing of the body and gives me more time here, well and good. As I say, I've never felt better. So we see where the journey goes, but I've no expectation, no clinging. It'll continue in this physical body until it doesn't anymore. I mean, we're all. I mean, it was interesting. I've never really said it, but looking at the APOC meeting the other day, I mean, everybody there, I would say, is absolutely heading into the twilight years. I mean, we were all in our 50s and 60s, or most of us were. So I walked once many years ago, with a wonderful man, and after a while, I would meet him occasionally here and there, and I discovered he was 94. Wow. Now, he's the oldest I've ever walked with. He was such a beautiful being, and I always had this sense. I said, "Oh, Michael," I said, he was a gentleman, a real gentleman. I said, I'd like to. I don't want to beat you, but I said I'd like to match you. You never know. I might be here till 94, but it's the prognosis would suggest otherwise. We'll see. Again, no attachment.
Well, I tell you what, you are the quintessential guide. You have guided us along the Camino, but more importantly, I think you are guiding us on our inner journeys. And the way that you are handling this is in the sense of a true guide. So I want to thank you for all that you've given to the Camino community from both a practicality perspective, but I think more importantly, from a spiritual perspective. Thank you for all that you've done.
It's been a pleasure.
I wondered if you might say a little message to folks that are considering walking in 2023. We're almost at the end of this year. If there's somebody that maybe is sitting on the fence listening to our interview and maybe has a little bit of fear about actually booking that trip, what would you say to them right now to encourage them to go ahead and book their flights?
I'd say something like, for many people, for nearly everybody that I've known who walked the route, the Camino has been a fundamental turning point in people's lives. So keep going. You're on the right path, you're in the right place. Keep going and keep going with an open heart and an open mind, and everything will become apparent.
Beautiful. Well, we will end this part of the interview on that note. Thank you for that. And if you'll just stay on the call, I'm going to go a formal ending. Thank you, everyone, for coming to the Camino Cafe. I know that you have probably been so inspired by this conversation. I know I have been. This guy's been inspiring me for years and in doubt forever will. So thank you, everyone, for coming.
Free as a bird now, with my feathered wings. I am free, free as a bird now, with my feathers.